Field Vision Sports presents The Matchup with Sasha Bushka.
Kyler Murray kind of looks like a little kid running from his parents when he scrambles in the pocket.
Scott Bushka.
I had to tell my daughter that today wasn't really about her first day of school. It was really about me and the launch of our company.
And Cody Alexander.
Randomly, no. As somebody who's been around football my entire life, I literally can say that I've never smelled smelling salts, nor have I ever seen anybody actually have smelling salts. I'm sure that they were used at some point.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome in to The Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to have you here as always. I'm your host, Sasha Bushka, joined by Head of Football Ops, Cody Alexander, and the legend, Scott Bushka. Fellas, how we feeling today?
Feeling good.
I don't mind that. I feel like your creativity is running out, Sasha. Like you might need to go eat some mushrooms or some mushroom chocolates or something.
Field Vision Sports does not advocate drug use.
Get your creative juices flowing a little bit. But hey, I'm excited to be here. I need football to come back. I've been stuck in single parenting hell for several days now. I'm not sure I need a snow-drenched, crappy Steelers versus Browns game to bring football back, but I'm just excited for tomorrow to get here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. It seems like one week ends and the next week starts before you even know it. Monday night to Thursday night's not really it's not really that long of a wait. So that's good times. We got a big show planned. Little shakeup at the top of the power rankings this week. Obviously, the Chiefs go down to the Bills over the weekend, and then we'll talk a little bit about the AFC playoff picture as well. On the NFC side, we'll talk about the NFC West, and we'll get into our picks at the end of the show. But I want to start off on the top on the AFC side, and I'll lead with this, Cody. The Chiefs go down to the Bills, lose by 9 points, 30-21. Game goes over. Josh Allen makes a big play at the end that basically ices it. Who do you have as the best team in the AFC as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think it's the Bills. And the reason why the Bills is, one, Josh Allen is playing lights out, but I think that defense is very underrated. That defense is built to beat the Chiefs and the Bengals. I mean, that's essentially what they beat that for. I know people are probably like, well, what are you talking about? The Bengals are atrocious this year. But if you go back 2, 3, 4 years, it's been the Bengals and the Chiefs at the top of who you need to beat alongside the Bills. And so that defense is built to match up and defeat Patrick Mahomes. That's what that thing was built for. I think that they finally have a core group of guys, especially in the back end, that they really feel comfortable with, that's going to be able to give them fits. And so to me, I'm going to go with the Bills. I think the Bills are the have to be the Super Bowl favorite in the AFC.
Yeah, I disagree, and not because I'm a Chiefs homer. It's hard to put my finger on it, but there was something weird about that game on Sunday. And what I mean by that is we know Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive game planners in all of football. He never spied Josh Allen once, including on that 4th and 2 to ice the game. The defense we played felt pretty vanilla. And the Chiefs never tried to get Travis Kelce going. Travis Kelce has shredded the Bills over the years. There was something about the game plan and level of urgency for the Chiefs that just screamed to me like they're leaving something on the table because they know they're going to have to play this team again. And I know that they wanted to win the game. I'm not saying they didn't want to win the game, but I'm pretty sure they didn't throw the kitchen sink at the Bills from both an offense standpoint or a defense standpoint. And you got to beat the champs in the playoffs in January. And I still think the Chiefs are set up to be the 1 seed, right? So you got to beat them before I think the Bills are the best team in the AFC.
One thing I'll say about that's a dangerous game to play. especially when you're staring at a game where you're 9-0. The second place team that you're playing is 8-2. If you win that game, you basically lock up the 1 seed. I think according to ESPN Analytics, they would have been like 93% for the 1 seed if they win that game. So it's a dangerous game to play. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I would look at it like this. If you ask like who's the best team in the AFC, I think that's a different question than who do you favor to go to the Super Bowl from the AFC. Just in the sense, like, you could talk about the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bills, maybe even the Texans, if you're just talking about who's the best team in the AFC. But if the Chiefs get the 1 seed, and even if they don't, when the playoffs come around, you're going to be hard pressed to find people who don't think the Chiefs are going to win those playoff games when they play any of those teams heading into the game. They might not be favored in Vegas, but when you just look at make a pick who's going to win the game, nobody's going to bet against Mahomes at this point. So I think like the answer to the best team in the AFC and the team you think that's going to go to the Super Bowl out of the AFC might be two different answers right now.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I just and yes, it's a dangerous game to play. I'm not suggesting the Chiefs lost that game on purpose. They didn't. The reality of the fact is that the Bills have beat the Chiefs 4 straight times in the regular season, and they've yet to beat them in the playoffs. And yes, it comes down to Mahomes, but I think as much as anything, it comes down to game planning, right? And the Chiefs have an approach to how they game plan these regular season games versus what they're going to do in the postseason. And something just felt off to me about, like, it just felt like they were holding something back.
Well, I mean, they probably try to play them straight up, which I think for a team that knows that they're going to go to the playoffs, we know what kind of the Chiefs' track record during the regular season. They try and play teams straight up, and then they kind of dip into the bag as they get further into the playoffs. And we've seen this over time and time again, especially offensively, where they will pull something out that they've essentially set up all year for this. They're probably the only team in the NFL that can do that. Everybody else needs to try and win every game. And so you game plan every week. I understand what you're saying, Scott, too, of like, they didn't play to lose, but they weren't playing it as a playoff game. So I do probably, in that sense, Buffalo probably is sitting here thinking in this game, if we don't win this game, we don't get home field advantage. So we're treating it as a playoff game. We're throwing the kitchen sink at them. We're going to do this, and we're going to lean in. I just would counter that with, I do think that this team is built to beat the Chiefs. That's what they built it for. 12 personnel quarterback who can throw on and kind of isolate the corners outside. They're going to have both big receivers come playoff time. They can run the ball, which is going to be something that, yes, the Chiefs are awesome at, but it's going to ball control. We talk about game script all the time. Controlling the ball, that's going to be key. If they can play in Buffalo, I just think it changes everything that we're thinking of. But I'm with you on the fact that Spagnuolo probably said, let's just go ahead, stay true to who we are. Let's try and play a clean game. And they just could not win straight up.
Yeah, I just don't think they're going to be playing in Buffalo. And most of it comes down to the Chiefs' schedule is easy for the remainder of the year. So, like, if you assume that Buffalo is going to lose one more game, I think the Chiefs only end up with 2 losses.
Yeah, I can see that too. I just know, if you think about it, just from they dropped that loss to the Cardinals at the beginning of the year, which doesn't look as bad as it does now. But you just kind of look.
They didn't lose to the Cardinals.
Yeah, they came back
about the Bills.
The Bills came back and won that game.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
They lost to Houston and Baltimore.
Yeah, that's right. They came back. That's right. They lose to Houston and Baltimore. Both have good defenses. Both play good run defense. So, to me, I think that's, when you look at it, the Chiefs are probably going to end up the number 1 seed, but the Bills had to win that game, and you could just see it different in that urgency.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to come back up to a little bit more of 30,000 feet on this. The current playoff teams in the AFC are the Ravens and Steelers out of the north, the Bills in the east, the Texans in the south, and the Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers out of the West. And that's, if the season ended today, those would be your 7 playoff teams. Are we looking at a situation where we've got 6 games left and the only thing people are, or 7 weeks, some teams 6 games, some teams 7 games, the only thing people are jockeying for is seeding at this point? Or can the Colts, the Dolphins, or the Bengals put together some sort of run to shake up those 7 teams?
I think any of those.
Yeah.
I actually think last week the AFC picture got more interesting because the Miami's winning, the Colts are winning, and they're, if not better, they're at least more interesting with Richardson, and they're able to win more games that you wouldn't expect. And the thing that's interesting about the Broncos schedule, even though the Broncos are ascending, is I think they have to play a lot of these teams on the way in. So I think that 7 seed is up for grabs. The first 6 are probably pretty locked and loaded.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos are going to have to play the Colts. They're going to also have to play the Bengals. They have the Chiefs and the Chargers again that they're both going to have to play. They play the Raiders this week. So I do think that, like, to your point, if there's a team that drops out, it probably is going to be the Broncos. I would say out of all of those, the Dolphins probably have the ability to get hot. I mean, when you look at the Colts, you're going to have to say, okay, can Anthony Richardson be consistent enough to get them into the playoffs? Yes, they're playing in the South, but as we know, those can be some knockout, drag out fights, even for the Texans. But I think the Dolphins, with their talent, with that defense starting to play better, and then with Tua back, starting to figure out kind of an identity with them, I think that they're the ones that can get hot.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting last question on the AFC. I believe the Chiefs and Chargers have played once this year. The Chargers are actually only 2 games back in the AFC West. They have another game against the Chiefs. Is there a world where the Chiefs go from 9-0 to a wild card team? I don't see it. They have the Panthers this week. That's probably a win. They could even sustain a loss to the Chargers and still be a game up on them. But the Chargers are quickly at least making it a conversation in the AFC West.
Look, here's the issue that I have. Like, if we're going to play this game, you do see where at the end of their last 3 games, let's say they do drop to the Chargers. Okay. So they enter their last 4 games with 2 losses. They're probably going to beat the Browns. They do have to play the Texans, Steelers, and then at Denver to finish up. So that's not probably the greatest of schedules that you want to have to finish up. So is there a world in which they could end up and like slide into a wild card? Probably, because the Chargers, if you look at theirs, they do have to play the Ravens. So like, let's say they win the Ravens, they beat the Chiefs. I mean, they only have the Broncos, who are right now a playoff team, and maybe the Falcons. So there is a way that there is a pathway for that to happen. Is that going to happen? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at both teams' schedules. The advantage the Chiefs have is that win against the Chargers was already on the road. The win they've had against the Raiders was already on the road. So they got Chargers at home, they got Raiders at home, Black Friday, which we'll be there. Fired up about that. So and they've got the Texans at home. So a lot of those games, I don't know. We'll talk about the slate. The slate this weekend is not that good. I'm actually excited to see how the Chiefs come out against the Panthers, because I think we'll see like what type of energy they're gonna have or not for the rest of the season.
Yeah, the reality is, and this is more of a testament to how they play on the road than that their home field advantage isn't great. But if you look at the Mahomes era with the Chiefs, the records are very similar, home and away. It doesn't mean they don't have a good home field advantage. It just means it hasn't made that much of a difference in the Mahomes era, whether they're at home or not. But you have other teams that aren't as good on the road, so it can make a difference in that sense for sure.
Yeah. Last thought on this. What I would say, Sasha, is hold that thought until the Chargers play the Ravens on Monday night. Because if they get past the Ravens, then I think it starts getting really interesting.
Yeah. Let's revisit this next week if they win, because then we can starting to play out some scenarios really in the last 6 weeks of the season where, okay, the Chargers can start chipping away at this, especially with the way the schedules come together.
For sure. I want to take a quick look at the NFC before we bring Felix on for power rankings. The NFC playoff picture, really the interesting piece of it comes down to the NFC West. So I'll just make this simple. With the Cardinals leading the division and the 49ers taking another division loss this weekend, Cody, who do you think is going to win the NFC West?
I actually think that the Cardinals, and this is going to sound crazy, but I actually think the Cardinals are built to win this division. And the reason why I say that is that if you look at the 49ers schedule, they have to play the Packers this week in Lambeau. They're playing at Buffalo. They have to play at Miami. They have to play the Lions. And then they also have Rams Cardinals. To me, with all of the issues that they're having right now, I think that this is a team that barely scrapes by over 500. You go and you look at the Cardinals, they really play at Minnesota, and then they have to play at LA, and then they play the 49ers again to finish this up. I think that if they can win, if they can split with the Seahawks, and then they can beat the Patriots, beat the Panthers, and then win one of those games with the Rams. I mean, you're looking at a team that could easily win this division. I don't think that they run away with it. I don't think this is a team that's like they're going to go undefeated the rest of the year, but I think that they end up winning it. They can run the ball. They play good enough defense. That defense is getting better every week.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy.
No. I agree with you. I just... The reality is anyone who says they know what's going to happen in this division doesn't.
Oh,
I was just looking at their schedule, and it's like there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's like the Niners kick the crap out of the Seahawks in Seattle, and then the Seattle beat them. And the one thing I do think I know about this division is that the Niners are not as good as they have been.
Yeah.
And the other three teams are probably better. And none of their schedules look that easy. Even Arizona's doesn't look that easy coming in, So I don't know.
Arizona will make or break it for themselves because they have 4 division games left. So if they can play well in the division, they'll win the division because they'll be putting losses on those other teams.
I think that team is, and this is probably why they win. Like, I think that Arizona team is tough as shit. I think Gannon is a culture coach, and he's got them playing, they went blow for blow with the Chargers. When they run up against a team like the Jets, who are not tough, they just like bludgeoned them. So I think I'm with Cody. I think I give them a leg up, if for no other reason than they have a game lead on everyone.
Yeah.
I think they've got 3 weeks, and they'll play the Seahawks twice, who have kind of typically been kind of a softer team. I know they have a defensive coach. He's trying to figure some things out, but if they can go 2-1 in the next 3 weeks, or even go just lose, maybe you don't want to go 1-2, but if they can win both those games with Seattle, I don't know how really with the schedule that the 49ers have that they can catch up. Cause I do think that they'll end up having more wins than 49ers.
Yeah, well, and they'll have tiebreakers and things of that nature
Right.
with the division record. So, last on the NFC, and then we'll get into power rankings. I think the presumed situation right now is that you get 2 out of the East, the Eagles and the Commanders. You get 3 out of the North, the Packers, the Vikings, and the Lions, and whoever wins the South. Do you see a potential for one of those NFC West teams that doesn't win the division sneaking in to that wild card spot, to one of those wild card spots?
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here, and I mean, the Rams. What's so funny, and like you said, you pointed out, Scott. I mean, the West is so chaotic. But I think that there is a scenario in every case of like, okay, I can see the 49ers getting hot down the stretch. They put it together, they get healthy, they just start winning games, right? It's kind of like what we talked about with the Dolphins. Then there is also a scenario that the Rams do the exact same thing. Kind of the young players start playing really well. They start winning some games, and then they're the ones that end up catching, because the Cardinals do have to play several more. I think they have like 4 or 5 more division games. So it's not like out of shot that one of these, and then we start seeing some teams kind of drop.
Yeah. They'll need the problem is there's a lot of division games left in that division all around. And if they just kind of like split them all and one team beats and then another team and they all go 3-3 in the division, it's going to be hard for 2 teams to get a good enough record to grab one of those wild card spots. But the team I'd be watching is the Commanders. If they can keep it up. Jaden Daniels hasn't played as well the last 3 or 4 weeks. The Eagles handled them on Thursday Night Football. So if they start to come back to the pack a little bit, that opens up the door for an NFC West team. We're going to add Felix Johnson to the stage. We have our weekly power rankings every single week where Felix gives us the ins and outs of who's the best teams in the NFL, and we're going to let him defend himself as we pick him apart a little bit. How we doing today, Felix?
I'm doing great, my friend. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to have you.
Yeah.
All right. First, let's take a look at who Felix has in his power rankings this week. Out of the rankings, the Commanders and the 49ers. Took a while on the 49ers, but they're out of there. Honorable mentions, the Colts and the Texans are 2 AFC South friends. The Baltimore Ravens lose to the Steelers and move from 7 to 10. Number 9, just entering the rankings, the Green Bay Packers after winning on a missed field goal by the Bears. The Cardinals or on bye are at 8. Vikings moved from 10 to 7. The Chargers, with their win over the Bengals, moved from 9 to 6. Steelers at 5 after beating the Ravens actually moved down a spot, but that's more about what's going on around them. The Eagles moved from 8 to 4 with their win over the Commanders. And then a little shakeup at the top. The Chiefs lose to the Bills and move to number 3. Felix has the Detroit Lions at 2 and the Buffalo Bills at number 1. So I'll start this time because I usually let Scott and Cody go into it a little bit. I want to look at the very top of the rankings there and just explain your logic. I know the Bills just beat the Chiefs, who hadn't lost in 15 games, and the Bills have looked good as of late. But the Lions just dismantled. I know the Jags aren't great, but they dismantled the Jags 52-6. And I know you had the Bills ahead of them last week, but most people would have disagreed with that then. And I think you couldn't find one power ranker in 10 probably that doesn't have the Lions as their best team in the NFL right now. So explain the Bills over the Lions for me.
I think particularly with the what the Lions have done over this entire season, and we talk about all the time, you play who's on your schedule, but all their dismantlings have been against the lesser teams on their schedule, like the Jags, like the Titans. We've seen it over the last couple of weeks. And if we were talking about like the Super Bowl being played in New Orleans between the Bills and the Lions, I think 3 out of 4 of us would probably take the Bills. And I know that's a long ways away, but and then the quarterback. I know that Jared Goff has been putting up incredible numbers and everything, but I think we attribute a lot of that to Amon-Ra St. Brown being great, Sam Laporta being a great young tight end, Ben Johnson probably going to get a head coaching job, and then Josh Allen's just doing Josh Allen type stuff, and that's why the Bills are winning. And again, the win is weighted when you beat the undefeated back-to-back Super Bowl champs.
Yeah, so explain, like, I guess my follow-up to that would be, would you say that you think most people would pick the Bills over the Lions in the Super Bowl just because of Josh Allen?
I think that's a
Why do
big
you
part
say
of
that?
it. I think the same calculation would go through people's heads of like why they picked the Chiefs over the 49ers in Super Bowl 58, because even if you break everything down, they might have the better team. When it comes down to 2 minutes, you probably trust Josh Allen a little bit more than anything that the Lions have.
Okay.
Cody,
There's
disdain.
there is no world where the Lions aren't the best team in the NFL.
I just also think too the way that they match up. The Bills are like I mentioned earlier in the episode that the Bills are built to beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs are not a power running game. So this is a defense that wants to play almost 90% light box with a nickel, a coverage defender at nickel. Now, Taron Johnson is fantastic. But my point to that is this is a bludgeoning Lions team that does not mind getting in 12 personnel, getting in 12T, 21T, putting a nut type T as in an extra lineman instead of a fullback or another tight end, and then just running on top of you and then being able to defend that. This is also the Bills play a lot of too high. They have played a little bit more cover 3 this year. But then inversely, the Bills get the third most cover 1 in the NFL. Why do they get the third most cover 1 in the NFL? Because they don't have a receiver that teams really feel like is going to be a threat. Now, I know that they went out and got some. They're going to have some good guys. Keon Coleman's going to get healthy. But my point to that is that they also don't mind playing base. They don't mind the 12 personnel that the Bills are going to come out with. That's going to be a game that they're going to force Josh Allen to run the ball a lot. And that's not something I think the Bills really want to do. So, like, if I'm just looking, if we're going to play the projection game, and let's say this is a Super Bowl, I'm still going with the Lions. And that's why I think the Lions are the best team in the NFL.
I think what worries me specifically about the Lions, like if you go down their schedule, sure, they hung 47 on the Cowboys. Nobody really likes them. Put 52 on the Titans. But the moment they play a team that might make the playoffs, like the Rams, they had a close overtime game with them to open the season. They lost to the Buccaneers earlier this season. Their defense still does have problems. The Seahawks, I know that their offense does have a lot of firepower with how much they throw the ball, but they put 29 on them, and that's kind of proven to be somewhat of an average offense. And so the Detroit still has a little bit of the issues that I don't necessarily see as much with Buffalo.
I mean, the argument of they only beat good teams in close games is like
that's not
a ridiculous argument. That's what you do when you play good teams is you beat them in close games. You don't.
They can win anyway.
You don't beat good teams 52-7, or they wouldn't be a good team, right?
No, and I agree
they beat
that.
good teams in close games.
I agree with that. It's just that when they play those games, they kind of shift. They don't shift their culture. Obviously, they still run the ball. But Jared Goff throwing for 400 yards doesn't happen in those close, tight games. It's him throwing 5 interceptions against the Texans. It hasn't happened to the point where Jared Goff, even though he does seem to be their biggest superpower, if he doesn't play well, he could be their biggest weakness.
Yeah, I think the biggest superpower is definitely Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery for them, and then they work the play action off of that. But yeah, I mean, it's the thing is the Lions are making us forget how rare it is to beat an NFL team by 30 or 40 points because they've done it several times this year. Because they're beating those teams by 30 or 40, you can't discredit them because some of their games against good teams were actually close. Because most of the time, every NFL game is close, even if it's against a bad team.
And I'm just saying, like, even in the games that they play against the good teams, they don't look like the team that hung 52 on the Jags. Like, I mean, I know that you're not gonna but they lost to the Buccaneers. The
one point I'll give you is like
they could have.
The one point I'll give you is they might be getting a little bit of extra credit because their like propensity to keep the foot on the gas against some of these teams, like the Jaguars or when they played the Cowboys, like they're continuing to score when a lot of teams would just throttle it back. But either way, they're getting in a position where they can decide whether to continue to score or throttle it back, which usually happens even for a great team. Might happen once or twice in an entire NFL season, and it's like a regular occurrence for them right now.
Right.
But let's
we hold Jared Goff to a different unfair standard. Like Cool. He threw a 5 interception game. You know who's played 5 games worse than Jared Goff this year? Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Right? Like he is without question and objectionably been a better quarterback than Mahomes this year. I'm not suggesting that he's a better quarterback, but to be like, oh, he had one game with 5 interceptions is not a good argument for why Jared Goff is like all of a sudden a bad quarterback.
I mean, it's not all of a sudden. I mean, they're Jared Goff, and he's kind of disproved this year, but it's this year alone where he's been bad against the pressure, and that's why I thought like when they played the Vikings, and they'll play them again later on this year, unless they've already played twice, I can't remember. But like that's why Brian Flores, that matchup may be a little bit of a difficult problem for him, but he's disproved a lot of that this year. But I'm still interested to see what Jared Goff looks like later on in the season. And for the Lions at this point, if they're going to dominate the regular season the way they have, the postseason is the only question we have.
Cody uses this term a lot, but it's a apropos term when it comes to Jared Goff. Anchor bias, like because the Rams gave up on Jared Goff and traded him for Matt Stafford, people assumed when the Lions got him that he was just a bridge quarterback until they drafted somebody else and completely rebuilt. Mm-hmm. Jared Goff has been playing at a very high level the entire time he's been on the Lions. It's not just this year. Right. I mean, he was like he was top 5 in our threat ratings going into the year before the year started, based on I believe he was somewhere. Yeah, he was definitely top 10. So he's played at a very high level for a long time, and he went to a Super Bowl with the Rams. The reality is Sean McVay thought he could get a minor upgrade with Matthew Stafford, and they won the Super Bowl afterwards, so it worked out for him. It was a great deal. But the Lions and all the picks they got for it, and like Jared Goff turned out to be a better fit for them than Matt Stafford too, are pretty happy with the trade as well.
Mm-hmm. Your Felix, the problem with your Vikings argument is that the Lions already played them this year. And right. They scored 31 points. Goff was 22 of 25 for 280 yards, 2 TDs, and 0 INTs.
That's what I'm saying. He's disproving it this year. But every year leading up until this one, he's been pretty bad against the pressure.
They were the best team in the NFC last year, too.
I'd have to dig in.
I'm not saying that they weren't, but like there are legitimate numbers that prove that he wasn't very good against the pressure. I can find them.
Yeah.
You guys got any other qualms with the power rankings? We spent too much time on the Lions.
No, that was my biggest qualm. I'm not quite sure how the Green Bay Packers in a terrible performance against the Bears that they should have lost actually moved from outside the power rankings to inside the power rankings. But other than that, I don't have a ton of issues.
Just flip those with the Commanders and you're probably good.
Yeah, I mean the Packers, as much as it sucks, they won. I mean they won, and it seems like they had a film advantage because they knew that Cairo Santos was going to block or kick a little bit lower, whatever it is. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're a decent team, and Jordan Love's going to get it together. And I think you guys know how much I like Matt LaFleur and what he's done with that team, and they've stayed winning along the way, and so that counts for something. And then with the Cardinals, that was kind of from your guys' bullying from last week. They weren't in the power rankings or in the rankings at all, despite leading the NFC South, and I think that they at least deserve to be in this ranking at some point.
Hey, can I ask a question? Which is it's less of an issue with the power rankings because I get why you put them there, but to me, it's like one of the most interesting questions in the league that we didn't really talk about earlier when we were looking back is Baltimore Ravens at 10. A week ago, almost anyone would have said the Baltimore Ravens are a top 2, top 3 team in the league. They go in and they get beat up by Pittsburgh. I'm just like curious if we're all collectively off the Ravens as an elite team.
I am. I don't think that their defense is good enough. They do have issues on offense as well that Lamar just can't fix, that you can't just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. I do think that this is a team that is one of the better teams. Are they a top 10 team? Yes. But do I think that they're a legitimate contender to, go play the Chiefs, go play the Bills in the playoffs and win and go to a Super Bowl. Nah, I don't think so. Not this year.
I think for me, because of what Lamar and Derrick Henry have done so far this year, like both of them are getting legitimate MVP conversation, and their defense has been this bad all year long, and they still dress down the Bills. They still won 7 games up to this point this year and could win the AFC North still, and that's with this defense. So because of who Lamar is as a quarterback, and we've seen him win like 75% of his games or whatever it is over the course of his career, I'm going to go ahead and believe that the Ravens are going to at least be a playoff team this year, and then who knows after that.
Yeah. They'll be a playoff team, but like the question is winning games in the playoffs. Lamar, the issue that I sometimes have with the Ravens is like Lamar Jackson's a 2-time MVP. Maybe 3-time after this year, depending if they keep losing games, he won't be. But the point is he's regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I still hear after losses from the Ravens is that like they put it in the hands of Lamar too much. If he's really like that great, then that shouldn't be a complaint that people have to have after they lose a game. And so I think that's like the running game is great, but if it comes down to it and the quarterback needs to win the game through the air, Lamar's not the guy you're picking there. It's Josh Allen, it's Patrick Mahomes, and a few other guys even at this point that you would pick to win the game through the air. I think you maybe even go down to just looking at the AFC. You maybe even go down to C.J. Stroud in that regard, Justin Herbert in that regard. So that's a question mark for the Ravens offense for me.
That I'm fired up for that Ravens Chargers game.
Me too.
This week.
It's strange that Lamar has like 5 perfect passer ratings on his resume, but whenever it comes down to critical times, nobody wants him to throw the ball.
Yeah. But the only reason you get a perfect passer rating is because like the volume was so low in the passing game that there was like place to ding you on.
For sure, but just on its face, it's just odd.
Yeah, it is. It is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, he's if you want to go back to the people are going to lose their minds when I make this comparison, but he's similar to Jared Goff in that his best performances are when the run game dominates and you can lean on play action, low volume passing game, right? Like low volume but explosive passing game. And you don't necessarily want Lamar in a game where the run game can't get going, and so he's got to throw it 45 times.
Yeah. Scott, I appreciate that comparison. We need some less lazy, like more cross-pollinating comparisons, a running quarterback and a pocket passer, and we can still see how they can they can have some similarities.
Well, they're both highly dependent on the run game working.
Yeah, 100%.
Mahomes isn't as much.
Any last thoughts on the power rankings from Scott or Cody and Felix? Anything you want to say about your power rankings before we take a quick break and start looking at week 12?
No.
It didn't go as well as you would
I am a little shocked that I mean, I know that the Bills are the top topic on every sports talk show everywhere. But they did just beat the undefeated back-to-back Super Bowl champions. And that win should be a little bit weighted, even over a 52-point win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. At least in my opinion, at least it seems it should be.
Yeah, I can see your thought process. I will say this, though. There was a lot of people that even before this weekend would have put the Lions number 1 in their power rankings. So you forget about those 2 games. And
last week was fresh off the pick game. So I like it's hard to say that team's better than the Bills when their quarterback just threw 5 picks. Sure, they won, but
yeah. So I would say a lot of people would have had the Lions ahead of the Chiefs even before they lost. And almost everybody had the Lions at least ahead of the Bills before this past weekend. So that's where you get to it. Since you had the Bills ahead of them to begin with, I can see where you didn't have the jump after this weekend. But let's not dissect it too much.
It's hard for me to get that Ravens Bills game out of my mind.
Yeah, but I mean, are the Ravens better than the Bills at this point? You just said that they're out of the elite.
No, they're not. But it means that there's a formula. There's a formula to like grind this Bills team to a halt. And you need like, even still, like even with everything that happened in that game on Sunday, you needed Allen to put his cape on to win it.
Yeah.
Right.
They like
everyone. I will say this: you have to weight recent performances in the NFL the most because everybody has stinkers at some point in a 17-game season. And if you look at all, like the Lions have one loss, the Chiefs have one, the Bills have two. Everybody else has taken on multiple losses, even if we think they're a good team. So, and I hate this argument but sometimes you have to look at like what's a team's ceiling versus like what did they do in their losses. Although, if you're going to get through the playoffs, you have to win 3 or 4 games to get through. So you need to have some consistency and a good floor too, because you might not play your best game every playoff game. But it's just something to think about for sure. We got to get to a break.
Felix. Bills at Lions, week 15. I'll put any amount of money you want. You give me the Lions, you take the Bills. Any amount of money you want.
Let's do it. I'm willing.
Do it, Kels.
I've got the
like. Are we talking? Are we talking like in the thousands here, fellas? Just for the listening audience.
Scott doesn't pay me enough for it to be in the thousands, actually. Guys, so.
All right, let's end on that. On the other side of the break, we'll get into some of the key matchups for next week and our picks: a prop, an over/under, and a game pick. You're listening to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Stay with us. Welcome back into the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to have you with us for the second part of the show. Looking forward to Week 12. 6 teams on bye in Week 12, which does limit the number of matchups. We got the Browns and the Steelers on Thursday night. No one's too excited about that, but the Steelers do need to avoid the fly in the ointment. Some of the other matchups, Detroit, Indy. Not the best game for Indy trying to get back into the playoff picture to have to go up against Detroit the way they're rolling right now. Vikings and Bears. The Bears gave the Packers a game, so could be interesting. You've got the Cards and the Seahawks in that NFC West that we talked about earlier. 49ers, Packers. 49ers playing to like not become irrelevant before the season's over at 5-5, going, I believe, to Green Bay.
Yeah.
That could be an issue for them. You've got the Eagles and the Rams. And on Monday night, maybe the best game of the week, the Har Bowl, the Chargers and the Ravens. Any of those games that pique your fancy that you'd like to talk about, Cody?
I want to see the 49ers Packers game. I want to know. I think we will have an answer about both of those teams coming from this week. Are the 49ers going to start getting it back into playoff shape? Are they going to be a legit contender to really go out and win the West? They've just had some bad games where they've dropped some games. And yes, I do understand some of the issues with injuries that they've had. But then also too, the Packers offense has not been great. This was an offense that kind of lit the NFL on fire at the end of the year last year, really has never kind of gotten there. The defense, to be honest with you, the defense has really kind of carried this team at points. So I'm interested to see, are the Packers a legit contender for maybe even pushing the Vikings? Are they a contender to hold on to that wild card spot? So that's the game that I'm looking forward to.
It feels like I feel like both of these teams are not as good as we think that they should be. And so I agree 100%. It's one of the best games on a weak schedule. But the question is, like, either way, if the Niners beat the Packers or the Packers beat the Niners, like, how much does it tell us about these teams being elite teams?
I don't think it tells you elite. I think it's more or less, can they vie to make the playoffs? And then let's revisit that. Will the 49ers be healthy? What are the Packers going to do at the end of the year? Then that's what I think. But I think for the playoff picture, that we were talking about earlier, this one to me is kind of a playoff game within the regular season.
It might be a situation too where you learn more about the loser than the winner.
Yes.
Like whoever wins it, they might beat a team that's just mediocre, but whoever loses it, they lost. And like for the Packers, it's not as huge a deal because they have a little bit of a cushion, so they could still make the playoffs. But if the Niners lose to the Packers and they go to 5-6 and say the Cardinals get the win over Seattle, now you're staring at like a couple game deficit and don't have the tiebreaker. Like it's a conference loss too, which makes a difference in the tiebreakers for wild card spots. So it's a big deal for who loses it, I think, more so than who wins it.
Can I interest you in teasing the Niners up to plus 8.5?
I think that's a great idea. They've been losing games late this year.
They lose games late. They're going to be desperate. The Packers aren't that good. Maybe pair that with teasing the Lions down to 1.5. Just a thought.
Keep thinking, Scott.
Sasha, I have a piece of advice for the listeners, other than that one I just gave.
Which one's more valuable?
There's only 4 good games on the schedule this week. I don't know if the NFL did this on purpose, but they just happen to be the last 4 games on the schedule. Cody called out the first one: San Francisco at Green Bay, Arizona at Seattle, Sunday night game Philadelphia at Los Angeles, and then Monday night game Baltimore at Los Angeles. So the advice is take Sunday morning opportunity to go to church, take your wife to brunch, take care of your kids, do what you need to do, because there's no good games until 1:25 p.m. PST on Sunday. And then there's 4 pretty good ones.
I've been hearing through the grapevine that the Panthers have a puncher's chance against the Chiefs this weekend.
I'm putting the Chiefs in every single tease, parlay, known money line, known to man. Chiefs aren't losing that game.
Nah.
This is going to be great show fodder for next week. But no, I don't think they will either. We got to be quick on this because we got to get to picks. But Scott, did you have? You mentioned 4 games. Is there a specific one that you're interested in talking about more?
Yeah, I think to me, the game that is the most exciting, will be the most telling, is that you brought it up, and I like the term, the Harbaugh. Monday night, I think you've got a team in the Chargers that people are ready to crown as, I think, putting up there with your Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens, top of the AFC, right? Where they're 7-3. Sasha, we just had a conversation earlier about can they challenge the Chiefs for the AFC West. And so people really like that team. They tried to lose that game and be the old Chargers against Cincinnati on last Sunday night. And then you've got, I don't want to call it it's certainly not a desperate Ravens team, but like if the Ravens go in and lose this, I think they're down to 7-5, and not that they're probably at risk at missing the playoffs, but you're certainly at risk of like having to go to Buffalo or Kansas City the first week of the playoffs, which is not a penance that you want.
So, I mean, if you're Buffalo or Kansas City,
both teams. Sorry, go ahead.
If you're Buffalo or Kansas City and you get the 2 seed and you're playing the Ravens in the wild card round, that's not that exciting either. That probably pisses you off.
No.
Yeah.
No, dude, that's why the 1 seed is going to be important.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the Chargers is obviously like Harbaugh comes in and tries to make them a more physical team, and he succeeded in that. But the question is how do you compete on the outside? They lost all of their receiving talent, and they're doing it with a guy named Ladd and Quentin Johnston, who looked like a complete bust last year as a rookie. So maybe Harbaugh was right. Like the weapons are the tackles, and we'll figure it out everywhere else. So I just don't know. That worked against the Bengals in a shootout.
I just don't know if it works against the team with a better defense.
Right.
It would be my only question, because in the 3 or 4 drives leading, like before that final drive on Sunday night against the Bengals, Herbert had like 7 straight incompletions, and he didn't have much room to throw anywhere. So yeah, I still have questions.
Yeah. I think they'd also like J.K. Dobbins has had a fine year and Gus Edwards is fine. But if you're going to be a team that leans that heavily on the run game and makes that your bread, like they probably want to upgrade at that position eventually as well. So,
yeah.
What do you say we get into some picks?
Let's do it.
All right. Cody, I'm going to let you lead us off this week. Just for the listeners, I moved to 17-7 after last week's picks. Scott's inching closer to 500, 10-13-1. Cody got 2 wins last week. He's 8-15-1 now. I think we all went 2-1 last week. So, so that's pretty good. Cody, what do you got this week?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Brock Purdy under versus the Packers. I think this is going to be a game where I think the line was at like 258 when I checked it on the app. Even if it drops down below 250, I think this is a game that he doesn't get to 250. Probably gets right around 200. I think in our app we had him at 243. So that's my prop. Over under, I do think the Cardinals Seahawks is going to go over that 47.5. We had it at 49.7 in the app. I like that. I think both these teams are going to score. The Cardinals defense is not great. Neither is the Seahawks. Both of these offenses can score points. So I think that pushes probably the 50-point mark. And then I like the Raiders to cover the 5.5 against the Broncos. We actually have it, I think, at like 4.9 on in the app. And I think that's probably right where it needs to be. I think this game's going to be closer. It's a divisional game, and those typically tend to be a little bit closer.
I like it. Scott, which of those picks did he get wrong?
If Cody goes 3-0, he's back up to what, 11-15-1?
Yeah, right back in the mix.
I like the Purdy pick. I'm worried that the Raiders just aren't good, and Bo Nix and Sean Payton are on a roll. He says that as he wears a Broncos hat, so that's the one. That's the
Respect.
one. It's a little buyer beware for the listeners.
No, that game could easily end up just like the Atlanta game. I mean, it could end up being just like the Atlanta game. So but I do think it's a divisional game, and I like them to keep it close.
Game of odds. You never know what's going to happen, but you got to take the odds. Scott, what do you got?
I'm planning on going 3-0 this week. The first one, I'm full of advice for the listeners this week. I don't know why. Just maybe I'm going to call Sasha and give him some advice after this podcast, maybe.
What else is there?
We have consistently done really well taking running back unders against really good rushing defenses, namely the Vikings, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And I want to go at it again. I don't actually think that Chuba Hubbard's number is a real number, but wherever that number lands, give me Chuba Hubbard under against the Chiefs. The reason is because like running backs don't even go over their total when teams try to play a controlled game script against the Chiefs. Just take the Bills last week. James Cook didn't come close to hitting his number, and the Bills were in control of that game the entire time. I would expect the Panthers to be playing from behind against a really stout run defense. There's no way whatever that number comes in, he hits. So that's my prop.
Love it.
Yeah, I like it.
You look like you were looking for some validation there.
I like it. Fishing for compliments. This is awesome.
I was. Give me Cowboys Commanders over 45. You might think this is risky. The Cowboys are playing Cooper Rush. They're a complete disaster. What I would say is the Cowboys defense really sucks. Anyone can score on them. That's been proven week over week. You know the Commanders will. And Rush and that offense actually looked pretty competent against a decent defense last week in Houston. Certainly a defense that's way better than this Washington defense. So I would actually expect the Cowboys to be able to get it going a little bit. And so I like over 45 for Cowboys Commanders. And then the last one, I'll just keep rolling here because I see a lot of shaking heads, is this one makes me a little bit nervous, but I feel pretty good about it. Give me the Bears to cover 3.5 at home against the Vikings. 2 data points I'm working off there. One is the Bears should have beat the Packers at home last week. And the Packers, I think, are as good at, they're probably the same team to the Vikings, realistically. But the Vikings haven't looked good in several weeks. If I'm not mistaken, their last 3 games were against the Titans. And I don't mean Titans, the team. I mean the Titans of the AFC South, right? They played the Colts. They played the Jaguars. They played the Titans. And all of those games were super close, right? And so they haven't played a good team in 3 weeks, and they haven't blown any of them out or looked very good against any of them. So I'll take the Bears and a bounce back against the Vikings.
One clarifying question, Scott. I'm not sure what you meant by you don't mean the Titans, the team, but the Titans of the AFC South.
I was trying.
I
Like,
got
you
what
don't
you're
mean
trying
Julian
to say. The
Campbell?
Titans in the
I was
NFL.
trying to make fun of the quality of the NFC South or the AFC South and say like the Titans of the South, which are the Colts, the Titans, and the Jaguars. I think they played them in 3 consecutive weeks, and all of those games were close. But yeah, it's confusing because there also is a singular team called the Titans who play in the AFC South.
I heard,
Who's
okay.
one of those
I didn't
3
hear
teams.
you say Titans of the South before you clarified what Titans meant.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me
I'll
just
allow it.
read this to you. Week 9, Vikings beat the Colts 21-13 at home. Week 10, Vikings beat the Jaguars 12-7. Week 11, Vikings beat the Titans 23-13.
Yeah. I mean,
So they're grinding.
believe it or not, they covered 2 out of those 3 games. So the Colts game and the Titans game were covers. They did not cover in that Jags 12-7 thrilling victory, I don't believe. Let me give some picks. What do you say? I'm going back to the well on something that burned us last week because I'm a glutton for punishment. But the Commanders have the 32nd ranked adjusted rush EPA per play on defense in the league this year, according to Jackson Taylor. And shout out Jackson, data science extraordinaire. So I'll go Rico Dowdle over 37.5 rushing yards.
He'll hit 37. That's not bad.
He looks maybe slower than Ezekiel Elliott.
Oh, don't put that on him. No.
He's on my fantasy team. I want to like Rico, but he looked pretty slow trying to get to those 47 yards last week.
Didn't make it, by the way. For my second pick, I'll go to that Chiefs-Panthers game. You might think like I'm going to go with something along the spread because the Chiefs have had trouble covering big numbers, but that's not where I'm going. I'm going to the under. I think like the Panthers are going to have a lot of trouble moving the ball against the Chiefs defense, and the Chiefs just haven't like I think for this game to go over 43, the Chiefs got to get 30 or so of those themselves, and they just haven't put the throttle on teams and done that sort of thing in a very long time. I see like 24-14, 24-10. Chiefs win comfortably, easily by 2 scores, but it goes under the 43 points. And the last one I have is Houston -8.5 against the Titans of the South, of the AFC South. That's the Tennessee Titans.
Actual team.
The actual team. Yeah. Houston's played much better at home this year. They finally blew somebody out in a road game against Dallas this past week. We know Dallas has been getting blown out by everyone in Dallas, but it's still like gives some confidence for Houston going into this game. CJ Stroud's played much better at home. Joe Mixon is on a tear. His rush for like 100 yards and at least one touchdown in almost every game he's played in this year. So I'll take Houston -8.5 against the Titans.
I can see that.
Feels like a big number in a division game.
It is.
It's a huge
I heard something interesting, heard or saw on X or Twitter, where whatever it is these days, the Elon Musk verse. Everyone's hammering the Giants for getting rid of Saquon Barkley. No one's hammering the Bengals for getting rid of Joe Mixon. And at this point it feels like a pretty poor move by them.
I will say this in the Bengals defense is like Joe Mixon wasn't running like this for the Bengals. I don't think. I think he's playing better than expected, and it was like maybe an afterthought pickup for Houston. They knew he'd be their starting running back, but I don't think they thought of him as like we're bringing in Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. I think he's almost 30 years old. But I mean, it's worked out great for him, and I think they gave up like a 7th round pick for him. So it
was peanuts. We might have just taken for granted what he gave the Bengals in terms of being able to play with balance previously that they don't have now.
I'll give you a hot take. I don't think Joe Burrow finished his career with Cincinnati.
Yeah, he seems.
And I think this is part of
frustrated.
the problem.
The other defense for the Bengals is like they probably had to move on from Mixon because of cap reasons, and that's because they paid Joe Burrow. Whereas what people hate, and Felix is talking about this in the chat with the Giants having Danny Dimes, what people hate about the Giants losing Saquon is it's probably because they paid Daniel Jones.
Well, yeah, they picked Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley, and I think what we're seeing is they could have probably had the exact same year that they were having now by not paying Danny Dimes, and then still have a chance to add a top 10 pick to go get a quarterback in this year's draft. So I think the Giants are definitely one of those that it's the head scratcher.
Yeah. I love that hot take on Burrow, and I think you're probably right that his patience is going to wear thin with the cheap ass organization.
You said it. There are so many stories that come out of Cincinnati all the time of just how they refuse to pay players, they refuse to do the right things for an organization to win games, and to me, that's at the end of the day. I just don't see him staying there till the end. I think he either gets a deal like Stafford and goes somewhere on a big trade. That's what I see.
Yeah. The one issue that I'd have with that, or that potential, is Joe Burrow has an injury history. And so he may get traded if he like forces his way out with a trade, but I don't see him ever getting to a point where he wants to just play out his contract and then sign with another team, because he's always going to want that security in advance.
I 100% agree with you on that. Yeah.
The other thing, I mean, this is like somewhat of an unrelated topic, but it just because we're on it, dude, culture matters in the NFL. It is so clear that culture matters, and Jamar Chase he's impossible to like. He only cares about himself, and he gives me Aaron Rodgers vibes, and from the standpoint that it's like it's never his fault, and the only things that come out of his mouth are negative all the time. And I don't think like him as an epicenter from like as a culture carrier along with, and Joe Burrow isn't like this, right? But like Jamar Chase is like the evil cousin on the other side of the room.
Stephon Diggs vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Stephon Diggs vibes.
They franchise T this year, and we'll end on this, but maybe they give T the deal, even though he can't stay on the field, so that's kind of the problem, and trade Jamar Chase for a haul with 1 year left on his deal. You never know. We'll see. A lot of problems.
You can't not give Chase a contract. You really can't, but like there's just so many, like the Chiefs culture has probably been a hell of a lot better since they let Tyreek Hill walk.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Cincinnati, everyone go check out Felix Johnson's coaching hot seat article on the app this week and on the blog at fieldvisionsports.com. Real quick, I had Rico Dowdle over 37.5, Houston minus 8.5, Chiefs Panthers under 43. Scott had Chuba under, Washington Dallas over 45, Bears plus 3.5, and Cody had Purdy under 258, Cards Seahawks over 47.5, and Raiders to cover plus 5.5 against the Broncos. Fellas, nice show today. Any last words for the audience?
Have a good one. Usually these dead weeks, we end up getting a bunch of surprises. NFL never sleeps.
I agree 100%. Check us out at Field Vision MI on X, at Field Vision Sports on Instagram. Download the app. Go to fieldvisionsports.com. Sign up for the newsletter. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to The Matchup by Field Vision Sports.
Yeah, I'm gonna get in an ice bath this week. I'm on fire. I need to settle down.